I call this presentation actually a designed life, because the older I get and the more I work in the business of design, I realize that it's not just the business of design. It's certainly not just my job. I've designed a life over the years. And so what I'd like to share with you today is that 40 years that I've been involved in not just design, but in design, in creativity that is a little bit about typography, it's a little bit about art direction, it's a little bit about fine art, it's a little bit about design, it's a little bit about all those things. But when I was starting out, I wanted to know why the people that I really admired in the business of design got into design in the first place, and then what their lives were like. Not, you know, we all see their work. It's in the Type Directors Club annual, it's in the Art Directors Club annual, it's in all of the different annuals. So you see the finished, pretty stuff all the time, but you don't see, you know, the gritty, grimy, dirty, tough stuff that goes into making that beautiful design. And so what I wanted to share with you is my experiences, kind of the backstory of how we do what we do and how I started out in this thing. And I actually, back then, 40 years ago, it was very different than it is today, obviously. And there wasn't the formal programs that brought people into graphic design that there are today. I went to the Minneapolis School of Art, and I wanted absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with anybody or anything that was about any kind of commercial art. The school, which is now Minneapolis College of Art and Design, was separated between fine arts and applied arts, and the two groups were like, you know, oil and water. Nobody from one group talked to the other. So I was in fine art, I studied painting, and I thought, for the rest of my life, I'm going to create art. I'm going to paint. This one painting is actually of my lovely wife, Patsy, who is here tonight, and my beautiful daughter, Bridget, who is also here tonight. And this is when we were like 20 years old. And the reason I bring it up is that it kind of signifies what I was doing at that time, but also signifies the fact that I couldn't raise my family or support my family being a fine artist. I couldn't sell my paintings. So fortunately, my father-in-law worked he was the head of the marketing for a manufacturing company in Minneapolis called Onan. And he said, Joe, and he was worried about his daughter more than me, I think, and his granddaughter. He said, Joe, we have an opening in the art department. And so, with quotes, yeah, with quotes there, the art department. So I said, well, great, I can do any kind of art. I'll take it. So I went in and found out more about it. But what I wanted to continue to do was my fine art, my painting. And I have continued to do that. This is my lovely daughter Bridget today and our son Joseph, both of whom work with me in our studio. And then these are two designers, David Mashburn, who worked with me for a long time, and Allison Newhouse, who works with us today. So I do people, I do portraits, and what this does for me, the continuation of my fine art and my painting, is that it gives me this, I don't want to say creative release, because obviously design is a creative release for me, but when I paint, it helps offset the business aspects of design, and it frees me up to think more creatively. And it's almost like this therapy for me, where if I'm struggling with issues that have to do with graphic design, I can always go to my painting. I always have at least one painting going, and I can go there, and it's almost mindless, and I can paint, and I can mix colors, and I can concentrate on strokes, and I can basically work on a design, but it's a design that is totally free of all of the issues that all of you know about that center around the business of design. And so it's helped me through the years, and I would recommend it highly. Actually, our whole family has gotten into ceramics recently, and that is even more kind of down and dirty and gritty and getting your hands dirty, and yet there's a relationship to design that for me seems to unload different parts of my brain. I'm still doing something creative, but I'm doing it in a way that doesn't have the business parameters around it, and so they offset one another. And I can't tell you how many times when I'm doing fine art, I think about a solution for a design problem that I'm working on. Or when I'm doing design, I think of how I could address a fine art problem. So anyway, that's been a big part of my life. But I digress. I get back to the real issue here, which was how am I going to support my family at this young age? And father-in-law came up with this solution, and so my next masterpiece looked something like this. So this was work for the Onan Corporation in the art department. For 4 years, I did technical illustration. And I learned it on the job, didn't go to school for it, and I actually liked it. I wouldn't say I loved it, but I liked it because what happened is that the combination of this almost ridiculously technical, tedious work where I not only learned how to use all the tools. Obviously, back then this wasn't done on a computer. It was done with ellipse guides and rules and technical pens and all kinds of paraphernalia. And along with that, I learned about typography. We actually had a little typesetting machine in the art department at the manufacturing company. We had a printing press, so I learned how to actually print things. I learned how to make stats and photograph stuff and get it ready for building brochures or whatnot for all these technical manuals. And the combination really taught me how to be a designer. So I didn't, obviously I didn't go about it the traditional way. I didn't go through a design program. I didn't learn typography like people today do, but I learned on the job, and for 4 years, this is what I did until the company, who really, I was a pretty good student, and they came to value my participation in this technical illustration and all these designs that had to be done. And then they made the mistake of offering up this after-work job because they knew I could paint and I could draw. They wanted to do a mural, this big panoramic mural that traced the history of Onan, which started back in the 30s. And so they said, Joe, would you do this mural in our lobby that traces the history of the company? And I said, of course. And they said, well, how much would you charge? And I said, I just threw a ridiculous number out there. I said, $10,000. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, there's no way. But we want you to do it, so we'll pay you by the hour. Thinking that there's no way I'm going to spend that many hours working on this mural. So I enlisted my buddy Bucks McCool, who's up there on the scaffold there and airbrushing part of it, who I later went into business with. And we set out to create this history from the archives of the Onan Corporation, which went through World War II and their development and building small engines and generators, etc. And believe it or not, it took us over $10,000 worth of hours to do it. So after, and that was my business, one of my business learnings during this period of time. We came out at $11,375. I forget what the hourly rate was, but once that was done, $11,375 was just enough for me and Bucks to start what we really wanted to start, which was our own art studio. These are a couple of early works from artworks This one here on our left is one division within our corporation called Signs of the Times. And I want you to note the the beautiful hand-done typography in that three-dimensional presentation of our work. And then on the right-hand side was one of our early clients. I mean, we billed ourselves as not only sign painters, and we did signs for record stores and head shops and whole earth food stores and things like that. This is the early 70s. And then we attracted some clients like one of our best clients, Melowana. And Melowana was the manufacturer of classic paraphernalia, smoking paraphernalia, to take you to new heights in smoking pleasure. And you'll see my typographic.
They have to describe what a head shop is.
Oh, a head shop? Oh, well, a head shop is where you could purchase items such as smoking paraphernalia, if you get my drift. The what?
Posters, black lights.
Posters, black lights, you got it. Patchouli oil, stuff like that. And actually, we did quite a bit of trade out with these people, unfortunately. Slowed down the work, but what the hell. We had a lot of fun doing it. So Melowana led to other illustration jobs, which typically came to me via art directors who worked at advertising agencies in Minneapolis. And these guys drove me absolutely crazy. Because it was always make it bigger, make it smaller, make it wider, make it brighter, make it, make it flashier, make it whatever. And after 3 years of that, I decided I don't want to be an illustrator anymore. I want to be what these guys are, because basically they're telling me what to do, and I just soon tell somebody else what to do. So I got into advertising and became an art director. But I loved that period when we were actually making stuff. We were making signs, and we were doing dimensional stuff, and we were painting, and we were really having a ball. So I got into advertising because I wanted more control over the creative output. Did that. I worked for an agency for 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years. I actually worked for a couple of different agencies, and then a group that I was working with at one of the agencies said, why don't we start our own? So I said, what the hell, The advertising business was crazy. So this is 1980 now. Kind of fast forward a little bit. And this is Minneapolis in 1980. And this is typography back then, as some of you are aware. I think, art direction then was how tight can we kern and lead so that it is almost illegible. This was an ad for Fallon McGilligan Rice, which was, at the time, some of you remember them, hottest agency in the country, within a couple of years. Primarily because of this guy, Tom McGilligan, who was an amazing copywriter, a brilliant creative leader. And Pat Fallon, my buddy, who I lived with in college, who's in the middle there. And this is our ad over here. We started about the same time. They got all the glory. They did all the fantastic stuff. We did a lot of local retail stuff, and grew to be about 25 people. But over the course of 4 years, again, the business aspect of advertising really became cumbersome and difficult and political, and I really missed those days of artworks and getting my hands dirty and doing cool stuff. So interestingly enough, when I decided to leave my agency, this agency called me up, my friend Pat Fallon and Tom McGilligan, and they said, we have these clients, really good clients like Porsche and the Wall Street Journal, Rolling Stone magazine, and they're all asking us to do design. as well as advertising. And every time we bring a design project into our advertising agency, we screw it up. You know, it's just like the art directors think they can design stuff like an annual report or a logo or whatever, and inevitably we screw it up. So what we'd like to do is we would like to start a design company, and we know your background, we know you're tired of advertising, but you understand advertising and you love design. Would you ever go into partnership with us and have this design company that is affiliated with Fallon McElligott Rice? And it took me about 30 seconds to say yes, and I joined up with them. And what it was meant to be was a freestanding company, Duffy Design on one side, Fallon McElligott Rice on the other side. But ultimately, our primary purpose was to build brands in a way that was integrated between the discipline of design and the discipline of advertising, which makes all the sense in the world and seems so natural and obvious, but it's almost impossible. I was part of Fallon for 20 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times where we actually sat down in a room, left our egos at the door, and integrated in such a way that we created a brand expression that was consistent and appropriate in both the design applications and the advertising applications. I'll give you a couple examples. And I'm sorry these slides are, you know, they're from old slides and they're a bit difficult to see, but you get the gist of it. Basically, this is an ad for Porsche that Fallon did. And this is a brochure for Porsche that we did. And the brochure is really cool. I'm really proud of it even to this day, all these years later. The ad's really cool, but they have no relationship whatsoever. So if you got the brochure in the mail, or if you saw the ad in a magazine, it was two different brands. And the reason was, we wanted to design the way we wanted to design, and they wanted to create advertising the way they wanted to create advertising. And we could never really get in sync and establish a way to establish a brand language that was appropriate in all applications and all points of contact with the target audience. Here's another one. This was for US West. Whoops, sorry about that, I'm getting ahead of myself. Illegible type down here in the ad because it's crammed together. Illegible type up here because we wanted it so small that you would need a microscope in order to read it. You know, the basic issues about the Wild West and whatever are still there. You know, we had the Navajo blankets, we had the photography of the Great West, we had the Indian feathers and, you know, and all of the natural kinds of materials. They had a big, bold photograph, and they're obviously talking about the same things, but it could very well be two different brands. Problem is that Chuck Anderson and I, who was my partner when we started up, we wanted to do our own thing. And the art directors and copywriters at Fallon wanted to do their own thing. And this pride of authorship got in the way of doing what is the best thing for a brand. This was the stuff that really established our credentials, if you will. And we did it to death and kind of definitely pigeonholed ourselves because of it. Because Chuck Anderson's aesthetic and my aesthetic was about doing things that was nostalgic, that had this warm, you know, kind of textural, earthy feel to it. We literally created the art, and Chuck would take these old images from you know, from engraving books and whatever, and he'd manipulate them, and I would do these little paintings, and then he would drop them into the, you know, we'd pull apart old type that we'd find in these antique books. Every once in a while we'd bring another illustrator in, like Charles Burns, and have him do something. But for the most part, we wanted to create art that we were in love with but that wasn't necessarily appropriate for the brand that we were working on. So we became established as the guys who did this kind of stuff. And when it was right, it was really right. Like classical pasta sauce, which Prince Foods came out with, you know, way back then, I don't know, mid-'80s, was about a nostalgic recipe for that the guy who ran the place, his mother brought from Italy. So, you know, for that kind of brand idea, it was absolutely appropriate to do this old stuff. And that stuff sold like crazy. It was just meant to be a regional brand on the eastern seaboard. And within 2 years, it became the #1 selling brand in the category, overtaking Prego and Ragu, and it just sold like crazy because it was appropriate. Other examples were not necessarily appropriate. We did this scouting for chaps, and it really had nothing to do with their fashion. It had to do with our passion for creating things that had this nostalgic look and feel to them. And, you know, it was gritty and warm and whatever, but it didn't really sell clothing. But as I say, when it was right, it was really right. And every once in a while, a client would come to us and say, you know what, we would like you to do the advertising as well as the design because you seem to understand this brand better than our agency does. And so in those cases, if the brand was about something from the past, we could do something that really was a great expression in advertising, point of sale, as well as design. This project for First Reserve was absolutely perfect in many respects because it was an old recipe from the Civil War era when they didn't have hops in the southeastern part of the United States because of the war, so they used molasses instead. So 2 things happened. We licked our chops and said, this is really for us. This is perfect for what we do. And Dan Olson, who's an amazing designer who worked with me for many years, came up with this idea of creating a visual brief. Stroh Brewing Company gave us a verbal brief, said, here's what this thing is all about, here's the target audience, we're going to go up against Sam Adams and do a southeastern version of what Sam Adams is. It's going to taste like Sam Adams, it's going to be that kind of beer. So create a look and feel that's appropriate. And so Dan said, you know, I've got all this old cool scrap and let's dig up some more stuff and let's visualize that brief. And from that, we'll create a total brand experience. And from this is the first time we did this, and we've done it on every brand that we've worked on since. And what's beautiful about it is that we do it with the client. So we pick images, we edit images, we build a collage with the client so that we know that we're all on the same page before we actually start designing. And I can't tell you how this changed my business because from that day forward, it was so much easier for me to sell an idea because the client was involved with it and it wasn't a surprise. And I think in any creative endeavor, commercial creative endeavor that is, a surprise is many times death. Because if you do something that you think is fantastic and the client thinks they're going to see something somewhat different, and every client has something in their head, and you show them this and it's nothing like what they think they're going to see, they're surprised and they're disappointed. So doing this with clients, and again, I'll show you some more in some other case studies, but this really changed our business. Because from it, we could do, you know, we knew what kind of materials to use. We knew what kind of typography to use. We knew what kind of photographs to use and what kind of, you know, point of sale we would build. And we not only knew that, we had a writer at the time, and along with the writer, we could create ads. We didn't have to go to an agency. We said, you know, listen, we've designed all this stuff. We know not only what it looks like, we know what it feels like, we know the personality of this brand. We need some humor in it because we're going after young guys after all. So let's do our own ads. So that's what the outdoor and the print look like. Oops. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself. But that, more than anything else, convinced me that if it's really difficult to work with an agency, then designers should do advertising themselves, or they should at least create the visual brief and the brand language and then pass that on to an agency. Unfortunately, it kind of works the other way around because agencies make all the money and have the bigger relationship with the client, and they typically do the big stuff and then ask designers to come in and do the logo or whatever. But it really should be the other way around. Design should design the brand language, and once the brand language is established, you have all the materials to create the brand. Here was another instance where we were part of Fallon, and Fallon was asked to pitch the islands of the Bahamas, and they didn't want to do it. They thought it'd be political, it'd be a pain in the ass. They had all kinds of reasons why they didn't want to do it. And I talked to my team, and we said, you know what, we could nail this with a design pitch rather than an advertising pitch. Because the big aha when we found out everything about who they compete with and how they compete and why they're better and all this stuff is the simple fact that the Bahamas are 14 places and Barbados and all these other places that they compete with are one place. So we felt it was a design solution and we could build a language that would express that solution. And so we did the visual brief. First of all, it was January in Minnesota, and I had to recruit 5 people to go with me to the islands of the Bahamas and go to all 14 destinations and kind of, get a feel for it and take some photographs. So this was, this is just a sampling of the flora, the fauna, the native dress, all the things that we felt needed to be interpreted into the identity and the brand language to express the Bahamas in a proprietary way. That went to sketches, it went to this visual brief, which led to the identity, which used to look like that, and we turned into that. And when you're dealing with a language, you need to make it broad enough so that it can address lots of different things. It's a brand architecture, and the layers of architecture need to work in such a way that you could address the identities of all the different destinations in a way that's consistent with the grand identity. So each of these islands in the Bahamas who had their own website and their own logo and were going after business vacationers on their own, all fell into line, and now they have their own flag, they can say their own things, but they all ladder up to a relationship with the master brand. And then we created iconography that related to all the experiences that you could have in this same style for golf and tennis and fishing and snorkeling and all that stuff. And from that, everybody in the Caribbean has beautiful photography. But if you frame that photography in the brand language that is unique to the Bahamas, you say, before people even see this message is coming to you from the Bahamas, that is from the Bahamas. And it is unique and it stands apart in not just communications, but tchotchkes and posters and whatever. So, and we don't do all this stuff. A lot of this stuff is done by people in Nassau or whatever, but they have this language to work from that makes sure that everything they do, whether it's dorky or cool, is consistent with the language. And the website, which is the ultimate vehicle for all things Bahamian, is done in such a way that you can literally take those icons. You can click on a golfer, for example, and what pops up are the icons from the islands where they have golf courses. Same thing with snorkeling and whatever. And then transferring that to the communication, again, Fallon didn't want to do the ads, but they said, or they didn't want to be the advertising agency, but they said, you could use one of our advertising teams. And they built these ads, outdoor boards, print ads, that used the language in such a way that really gave them a unique presentation of what their brand is all about. This was the next year's campaign that we had nothing to do with, but again, they were armed with what was necessary. And you guys in New York probably saw these a few years back. The subways were literally papered with that brand language. Again, we had nothing to do with it, but it was a matter of establishing this brand in the best possible way. So that's the Bahamas, and that to me, well, you know, again, 2002, 2003 was kind of the tipping point. And I realized that we didn't need to be associated with an advertising agency. In fact, it was detrimental because a lot of the business that we were going after, because we were part of this larger corporation, Fallon became part of Publicis, and Fallon had a client, BMW, and we didn't do design work for BMW, but because we were part of the corporation, they didn't want us to do a project that Toyota wanted us to do. So I went to my friend Pat Fallon and I said, you know, Pat, I'm 55 years old. I want to spend the rest of my time in design doing what I really love doing. And he said, Joe, I understand totally. And so we split, and ironically, it was a great time to be a designer because right around that time, you know, 2004, 2005, I think the appreciation for design just escalated. Not only with companies that have always appreciated great design. We're not talking about Alessi and some of these, you know, great design companies, but normal, everyday big companies realized that design was a critical factor in them selling their products. So it was a scary thing to break away from the mothership, but it was a good time to do it. And in, well, it was 5 years ago, I started Duffy and Partners, with the intent to simplify my life and to simplify the process of design. And this lower right-hand corner kind of explains it. It's as simple as imagine, create, and then bring it to life and activate. And so that became our way of creating new brands or taking existing brands and breathing new life into them. And I'm just going to share a few of those with you now. This was our first client out of the box when we became independent. The Times had been, you know, it's a 25-year-old company. They were kind of at the absolute height of bath and body gifts all over the country. And this is what they looked like. And they came to us and they said, you know what, Joe, we need a new haircut. Because younger women are saying, it's my mother's brand and you need to breathe new life into this thing. And so we did, and with a new logo type and with a new icon, but more importantly, taking all of these individual product lines and using design, using type, using illustration, again, we create ourselves, became this kind of eclectic mix that had products that all had unique personalities, almost like members of a family, but they were members of a family. They all kind of hang together under this primary identity here. And that's, I think, kind of become the thing that we do best. Taking an existing brand and bringing some art to it and making it more appropriate for a new audience or for an emerging audience or within a competitive set that requires it to be different than what it's been in the past. Fresca is another one. Again, going back to the visual brief, which is here and here. These are the collages that we created that spoke to what the product actually tastes like and feels like, and the sophistication that was kind of missing in the soft drink category that would be a little bit more adult-like and a little bit more appropriate for an older audience. So these were the two visual briefs. And then, you know, here's what we do on every project. Starts out with the sketchbook. All the designers on the team draw out their initial thoughts. It goes to a more refined mode on the computer. And then with Coca-Cola, typically, we'll do anywhere from 3 to 6 different design directions off of that one visual brief that we've agreed to. And we'll take it into qualitative research and find out what the audience thinks. This one ended up winning out, but with some changes to it because it looked too diet and it didn't have enough of a relationship to the existing brand identity. So that morphed into this, which related color-wise, more like the old one. And then again, establishing not just a package or a logo or a brand identity, but a way to express this brand in many different ways by creating a language. This is advertising, surprisingly complex. That was done by an agency that I don't even know who they are. But they took that brand language and I thought did a really great job of expressing the brand both visually and verbally in a way that came right out of the language that we developed. And then again, you know, mixing, matching it, using it for promotions and messaging that dials it up, dials it down, dimensionalize it depending on how you want to speak to the audience. Here's one, quickly, Aveda Men, that we did a couple years back. Actually, my son Joseph was the lead designer on this one. There's his visual brief, or the team's visual brief at the top. Again, Aveda was not appealing to men. It's primarily a female brand, so they wanted us to create an identity that was more masculine, but was still about the environment, which they're very passionate about, and the ingredients and fashion. And this mixture of, you know, images that we pull from our files, or that in some cases other designers have done, was kind of the way of us getting on the same page with the client and making sure before we started doing design that we were all in agreement on how to take it forward. Sketches. In this case, we were doing new bottle forms, so we did design ideas that way, worked on different logo versions. These were the two different directions that were taken into research. And then this is the final result, which is out there in the market today worldwide and selling better than they had ever imagined. This is what it looked like before. It's very simple, elegant in a way, but now it, I think, appeals to men in a much more prominent way. In the brand language, here's another one where we did the advertising. We did the photo art direction and all the elements behind the standards so that we could do not only the packaging and the design applications, but also the communication applications in the store, in outdoor advertising and print advertising. So that's Aveda Men. And then here's my little friend Wolfgang Puck. This one is rolling out as we speak, and he is a character. His theme is different than Julia Child's. Hers is Bon Appetit. Wolfgang's is, Joe, make my picture bigger. So Wolfgang, I mean, he's a brilliant guy, unbelievably creative. His products, I mean, he's so passionate about what he does. We call him the Picasso of the culinary world. And he really is. He's amazingly creative, but he's an egomaniac too. And although I get what he's saying, he wants to make eye contact with his audience because Wolfgang Puck is the brand. He wants to tell everyone, I came up with this recipe, whether it's frozen pizza or a night out at Spago. I did it. I want people to know that. I want to make eye contact with them. So I want my picture on the package, and I want it big. I tried to convince him that we could do it in more subtle ways, like, you know, we could hire Michael Schwab and do this beautiful, iconic, you know, silhouette of you, and it would make you even larger than life. He said, well, we can use that a little, but I want my picture big. And he was, you know, he was a real taskmaster, but in the end, you know, we're pleased with what we've been able to do with him. We also tried to do other creative executions of making his picture big, but he kept coming back and saying, no, I want the photograph like this. And so here's the brand language, or the graphic standards. You see him, actually he should be bigger there in the right-hand corner. But those are the elements. And then this is the way his products have looked over the years. Everybody, all these different licensees and all these different people who have different products, whether it's the pizzas or the coffee or the knives or the pots, the pans, whatever, they all do their own thing. And so our job was to create this language in such a way that we could bring all this stuff together. And that's what we've done. This stuff is just coming out now, the pizzas and the coffee and the corporate standards and all that stuff, and it'll soon be applied to his fast serve restaurants, his quick serve restaurants, and even his fine dining restaurants. Got a couple more here. This one I bring up, this was another family project, labor of love, Herradura. Our family, we're in the back row here, they've already had a tequila tonight, I think. We love tequila. And so when Brown-Forman called us and said, we'd like you to work on Herradura, it was like, how much do we have to pay you? And so we jumped on this. Joseph and I and Tricia Davidson, my niece and our managing partner, took a trip to the tequila region of Mexico. And actually went out into the agave fields, went to this amazing distillery, and took these pictures and had the true tequila experience. This is a 200-year-old brand, and it's still made the same way. If you like tequila and you haven't tried it, you got to try it. I think it's far and away the best tequila out there. And from this trip, and going to the Cultural Museum in Mexico City, and going here, taking pictures and collecting stuff, this was our visual brief that we created. It was kind of the distillation of all the things that we experienced in the tequila region of Mexico. And of course, Herradura in Spanish is horseshoe, so that had to be a prominent element going forward, because this is the #1 selling premium tequila in Mexico, but it is far outsold by Patron in the United States. And so now they want to go head-to-head against Patron in the US because it's actually a much better tequila. It just doesn't have the cool factor. So here again, here are some different directions that we took into qualitative research. These were the final 3 directions that we presented. The first step is to create the new brand identity on existing bottles. This is Mexico, and that one is the United States. And then the glass we also designed new glass that'll come out next year. And then here's what's out there now. And actually, you know, after establishing the brand language and creating the identity, the typography, and all the different elements of the brand, the photographs and whatnot, the Brown-Forman design group actually put this finished design together, and I think they did a really great job of it. So again, you get the language right, any good design group can do it. This is the most recent one, and I'll be quick with this because I'm on 45 minutes. This is Minute Maid, and this was a mother, because this isn't just Coca-Cola's brand in North America, Minute Maid. It's all of the 125 brands that they own in the juice category all over the world. So we had to develop a common brand language that can be applied to all of it. Again, here's the visual brief. You'll see this smile here becomes apparent in the execution. Sketches, lots of different ways of retaining the familiarity with the black mortise and the white logo type, but changing it up in such a way that would bring a new look to it. Talk about a typographic nightmare. We had to develop a logo type that would be appropriate, and this is just the beginning. These are the first of the different languages and the different brand names that have to work into this entire portfolio system. And then on top of that, we had to do, everybody throws juice on the carton, or throws fruit on the carton, and it's this abundant fruit. What we realized, which is pretty basic, we needed to show fruit in a totally unique, proprietary way. So that's where the smile came in. And that's the consistency. Terry Heffernan shot these photographs in San Francisco with us and did an absolutely brilliant job. And that's kind of the visual presentation of the product intrinsics that work in such a way that the shelf set creates patterns. Oops. And here are some of the early packaging designs that are being done by us in North America, but also in other groups around the world, using this formula of stacking fruit in that way, creating a smile, and then using the logo type and the mortise and this canopy of leaves in a consistent way, regardless of whether or not it's a big facing or a very small facing, as you see over there. So this is what they had. This is just a few of the brands that they owned around the world. And then this is what they look like now. Lots of different languages, lots of different brand identities, but all now fitting within the Coca-Cola juice portfolio. And then this is how we extend that language out and use it for advertising, sides of trucks. BMW designed the cooler using that brand language. Billboards, packaging, the whole thing. This is the team. As I told you, Bridget, our daughter, project manager, Joseph, a designer, my niece Tricia. It really is like family. These are a lot of people. These people have been with me for 10, 12, 15 years, and it's an amazing group. And this is where we live. We're in an old mill warehouse overlooking the Mississippi River in Minneapolis, it's a nice place to be. It's cold this time of year, but it's a nice place to be. And this, I think, more than anything else, is what drives our business, our website. We are our most important client. I can't tell you how much time we spend showcasing our work, not just our work, if you go to Duffy.com, but also what kind of people we are, what we think about design, what we think about type, what we think about what's going on in the world in our point of view section, where everyone writes on this blog about how Duffy deals with design. Because I can't tell you how important it is, because every client who is considering you or us for a design project, first thing they do is they go to the website. And the work has to be showcased in such a way that it shows not only the work that you do and how you work, but how you are as people, what you're like. And if you can give them a taste of that, and you can do it in a way that's better than everybody else, that's a good thing. Another thing we're passionate about is our environment and where we live. This is also on our website. We created, each of the designers created a poster for the Mississippi River Fund, which keeps our river clean and keeps our national park that literally runs right in front of our studio clean and safe. We have a section that says it's all about our favorite things. It tells us what we're like in terms of not just designers, but people. We have a section that showcases some of the continuing design programs that we do, like our annual holiday wine bottle. A different designer does it every year. And here are our beliefs. Creativity is our core competency. We promise fresh, innovative ideas. We're lean, we're fast, we're agile. We combine experience, creativity, and intuition with a disciplined process. We believe in respectful partnerships among our group as well as among our clients. We believe in our right to earn a reasonable profit. People are what matter most. We'll nurture a creative and fulfilling environment for everyone who works with us. And our success will be a team effort. And how we run the business is we're transparent. Everyone on that team knows where we're going and how we're doing financially, and how successful our work has been in the marketplace. We share that with everyone. We're expedient. We leverage our leanness to work together efficiently and to our full capacity. We have to be flexible. We're using all the tools possible to allow people to balance work and life. People don't want to come into work. They can't come into work. I don't care. They can work at home or they can make it up. As long as people are doing the work, they don't have to physically be there because their life is more important than their job, in my estimation. We're going to set our egos aside and do what's required of the team and help the team. We'll be generous by rewarding everyone who contributes to our success. We'll be open to ideas, dialogue, and challenge from all. And we'll be optimistic about our business, about our life, and grateful for the contributions of every member of the team.